CCP, you must submit, right? Then you go to the wokes and they say you must sympathize. Now there's a real trick that they do here, right? You must sympathize. While the CCP says that they are powerful, what the woke say is that you are powerful. Because you are white or male or straight or cis or, like upper middle class or whatever, right? You are an oppressor.
Well, I mean, I'm especially an oppressor, though. I think I check all the boxes, right? So, I mean, I feel like I won this game, except maybe I'm Jewish through my mom's side. I'm Joe Lonsdale. Welcome to The American Optimist. Balaji, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Joe. Good to be here.
I want to start by asking you about your 1729 project. What does this signify? This reminds me, obviously, a little bit of the 1619 project, although obviously it's probably not the same knowing you, given what I've read. But what inspired you to do this?
Well, so 1729, it's neither 1619 nor 1776. It's not a year. It's a number. It's the sum of first number. That's the sum of two cubes in two different ways. It's 1 cubed plus 12 cubed, and it's also equal to 9 cubed plus 10 cubed. And why is that interesting? Well, it's basically like the number 79 is like E equals MC squared in India. And the reason is that India's greatest mathematician, Srinivasan this is like a super mathematical genius who grew up very poor in India and wrote a bunch of letters to people, mathematicians around the world. And one of them didn't send it to spam, didn't throw it in the circular file. This was like more than 100 years ago. One of them did not throw it in the wastebasket, but actually brought Ramanujan out. He said, this guy has to be a genius because nobody else would send me these crazy equations. Brought him out to Cambridge, and Ramanujan then rampaged through mathematics for the next several years, and he unfortunately died very young. And on his deathbed, this other mathematician came to him and said, the taxi cab number outside, it's got a very boring number. That license plate number is 1729. And Ramanujan said, no, Hardy, it's the first sum of two cubes in two different ways, because he was on a first name basis with basically every number, all these identities and equations.
Has anyone ever sent you a crazy email that led you to meeting them and doing something with them? Are based on this story, are you more open to crazy emails or no?
Yeah, no, I am. Certainly, Twitter DMs can be crazy. There's a lot of crazy people. But, the thing is, and this is interesting, one of my laws of physics is that the internet increases variance. Mm-hmm. So they say you have more upside and more downside and everything because that mediator is removed, right? The middleman, the moderator. So you have crazy good and you also have crazy. But
you get a lot of the latter. It's hard to filter out. And so sorry, keep going on 1729.
Well, yeah. So 1729 to me has always symbolized all of this talent that's off the map, which basically the world and that person they're both being deprived of giving what they have to the world, right? In another universe, that genius is just off the map, that Ramanujan is never found. He just starves in India or what have you, right? And with the global internet rising, 10 years ago, about 5% of India was actually online in 2009. I just, looked at this graph. Now it's more than 50%, right? That is basically, that's an insane number, right? 10x over a decade on something like internet connectivity. You're talking of roughly 1 billion people, 950 million of them were offline, about 10 years ago. And now 500 million people got online in the last decade, right? And so all these people finally now have a connection to the global internet, and we can work with them. We can, invest in them. We can, learn from them, and we can collaborate with them. And this is something that's motivated me for a long time. But I think the conditions are now propitious for doing this because we have cryptocurrency, we have blockchain, we have things where.
And so what you're doing is you're paying Bitcoin bounties for tasks in tutorials. What's the goal?
Yeah. So sure. What's the point, right? So Centurynet.com is a manifestation of this. It is to first order. It is Bitcoin bounties for tasks and tutorials. And what people do is they will read like an essay, and they will do a follow-up task. For example, there's an essay on working out, and you submit a proof of workout. Or there's an essay on a concept called network states, and you write a review of that essay. And the best reviews or the best workouts workout picks, or another case, we asked to crowdsource some data, the best crowdsourced data that gets 10 or 100, or whatever dollars in BTC or ETH or another cryptocurrency. So that's like to first order is you learn and then you earn. And that's like, you can understand it just on that basis. Medium to longer term, what I'd like to do is use this as a way to find talent around the world, educate them, fund them, lift them up, where we're not just giving them cryptocurrencies, but crypto credentials, which are not on-chain money, but on-chain effectively like micro diplomas, which represent that you knew a certain subject at a certain time. I can get into that as well. Go ahead.
Got it. So let's back up a little bit, Balaji, in your background. You've built a lot of companies. You were the CTO of Coinbase earlier, a general partner in Andreessen Horowitz. And so what are you doing right now? You're running this project. You're building multiple companies. You're trying to save the world from crazy people. What's your current focus? What's
my focus? I certainly have been doing a lot of tweeting and writing and angel investing and so on and so forth the last couple of years. And sort of been playing around since. I'm probably going to lean into that much more as sort of like the central vehicle for everything I want to do. My thinking is that we need to fund decentralized media, crypto protocols, startup cities, and network states.
So decentralized media, crypto protocols, startup cities,
and network states.
Let
me define all of that, right? So the long-term goal of Century is to build the first network state. And let me build up to what that means, okay? But first, let me define something. So I had this sort of, meme or whatever on Twitter where I was like, the 2000s was about tech companies, the 2010s crypto protocols, the 2020s startup cities, the 2030s network states, right? So what are those? Tech companies, we all know what they are, right?
Yep.
Crypto protocols, by now, people kind of know what they are, which are, there's Bitcoin, of course, but there's Ethereum, now there's BitClout, there's Zcash, there's Uniswap. These are essentially things that combine the first era of the internet, right? The P2P era of the internet. That was peer-to-peer, like node to node, and it was highly programmable, it was open source. Then the second generation of the internet was MVC, model view controller. That, that's a technical term that refers to the architecture of these things. And that was Facebook, that was, like YouTube.
What's it mean that Facebook and YouTube were model view controllers? What's that mean?
What that means is basically that you move from a topology where every node is pinging every other node, like peer-to-peer, to a hub and spoke topology, where these gigantic hubs like Facebook or Twitter.
Yep. So you had massive peer-to-peer, then you kind of semi-re-centralized it with different hub and spoke models.
That's right, and that's because of a fundamental technological thing, which is if you had what's called global state, right? That's say you have your Facebook profile, right? You've stored all this data there. You've got your photos and you've got your messages and your friends, right? If you're doing peer-to-peer, you'd have to send all that information to everybody every time over and over again, right? Which is very wasteful,
Yep.
So instead, it makes sense to store that at a central hub, and then that central hub has a ton of power. And that has been the fundamental architectural thing that has constrained us.
And you think a lot about power. You're obviously worried this power is captured and used in ways that you don't like.
Yeah, I mean, I think that basically I'm not an anarchist or anything like that, but I basically believe that we need to increase the amount of consent in society to go from where we currently are, which I would consider a 51% democracy, to 100% democracy. And what I mean by that is a 51% democracy is something where it's what it sounds like. 51% can vote to, do anything to the other 49%.
51% of people can ban abortion, or 51% of people can, who knows, like whatever they want to do, they can do.
That's right. They basically just get over the bar. They just clear that bare level of legitimacy in order to wield the state as a club to kind of make somebody do something. And then what happens is the fact that they don't have a lot of consent means they need to use a lot of coercion. Because they use a lot of coercion, that polarizes and that flips that 2% undecided voter or whatever back to the other side. So you have terrible situation where, essentially, a market or an election, capitalism and democracy are great, but they're formal mechanisms for conflict resolution, right? A community manages somehow to allocate resources, within your family, within your village, maybe not a big village, actually, let's say within your company, for example, you are not necessarily using market mechanisms to allocate everything. For example, everything that people are doing is not necessarily micro tasked. It could be, but it's not, right? Everything that's happening is not a vote, right? There's something which is sort of like, okay, you do this, I do that, and it's sort of like internal in the head, right?
Yep.
It's only when there's conflict resolution that you need markets or elections or both. And so it's not just that, America's about capitalism and democracy. In many ways, that's all that's left, because a lot of the community that's underpinned America has been eroded. Putnam observed this 20 years ago with bowling alone, right?
Yep. So our communities aren't working together to solve these problems anymore. So we've pushed everything to a 51% society, which is not working as well as it should be.
Exactly, that's right. Because you don't want to subject everything to a vote, or as pro-capitalism, and not everything is an auction, right? There are things that are allocated in other ways. And so
what's that have to do with model view controllers? Just to connect it back.
Pull it back, right? Okay.
Yes.
So the thing about this is model view controller leads to centralization because technologically we couldn't represent global state. We couldn't decentralize a database. Okay. We had to have it at a central hub like a Facebook or a Twitter or a PayPal, which are great companies, don't get me wrong, but we couldn't do that until Satoshi invented the blockchain. And that is a way to have global state, that is to say, everybody knows how much Bitcoin somebody has, right? Everybody can access it, everybody can read it, everybody can write to it if you have a little bit of Bitcoin, and everybody can write blocks to it if you have a lot of computation nowadays to mine blocks. Point is, it opens it up.
So basically, it takes things from 51% to 100% society if you run things in a distributed way, because everyone gets to opt in to whatever things they want to be part of.
Yeah, exactly. It becomes much easier to opt out of something, right?
Yep.
Because that hub no longer has control. Another way of putting it is blockchains turn. I know this is technical. I know your audience, but basically, blockchains turn every user into a root user. You have total control over your data, over your money. You cannot be deplatformed from it. You can't be censored. Okay. One way of thinking
is that a problem if you can't be censored? I mean, what about? There's always a question. What about? We talked to Ashton Kutcher earlier, who's like saving all these kids from child abuse material. What about child abuse material? Like, are there ways you can censor some things and not others, or is it just better to even have,
So the issue is with everything like this is that saying hard cases make bad law.
Yep.
Right. So hard cases make bad law, meaning that if everything is premised on the edge case, which is aberrant, and that is governing the base case, that's probably not a good solution for the base case, right?
Yep.
In the case of like extreme content like that, there's a couple of options, right? The first is, if you look at how BitClout works, anybody can set up a client to BitClout, which is to say you can set up example.com and render the posts however you want. It's as if Twitter's backend was totally open and everybody could render the tweets however they wanted. How Twitter used to be.
But no one has to listen to them, and people can still report them to the police or et cetera.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. The thing is, even from a pure utilitarian standpoint, I think that edge case harm is often exaggerated to basically control 99% of people, And have you seen that cartoon, which is like, how do you want this wrapped? And it's like terrorism or like the children, and it's basically like internet, filtering.
Yeah. So basically people use the edge cases to get control and to have these centralized control, but then the centralized control ends up doing even worse things overall. And so you're saying it's better. This is the whole concept of liberty to begin with, which America was founded on, is that you have liberty and you deal with the edge cases without getting rid of liberty, basically.
That's exactly right. And, here's a silly analogy, but I think an interesting one, right? If somebody sells you a chair, okay, that chair is in the physical world decentralized. The guy in China cannot hit a button to make the chair vaporize into dust.
Yep.
There isn't like a connection, a cable that goes all the way back.
This is what terrifies me about digital money, that the United States government, of course, the big statists want all digital money that the United States centralized controls, because they just press a button if they don't like you and it's gone.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. And so the thing about it is, if you sell someone a chair, you sell someone a kitchen knife, okay? 99 point whatever percent of people are just going to be using that for cutting onions or whatever, right?
Yep.
0.00 whatever is going to go and stab somebody. We don't hold Oneida responsible for that because it's decentralized.
I mean, some crazy people do want to hold people responsible for some of these things, but obviously you can't. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah.
Okay, fine. So you can say cars, right? You could say, but you're right. There are people who are just sort of, by pushing it into that domain where you have a object that can be clearly used for like nonviolent behavior, and then somebody misuses it, then like banning knives or banning cars, people sometimes crazy people use a car to run somebody down. That does so much damage to the rest of society that it's clearly not the right approach, right? So by decentralizing it, it's unrealistic to tell everybody to use like blunt butter knives because somebody stabbed somebody once, right?
Yep.
So that's kind of the framework here, where
so we've moved from the Facebook and the LinkedIn and the Twitter and these other areas to this decentralized world. Now that's where we're going right now, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So the three areas of the internet are P2P, MVC, CVC. So peer-to-peer, which are programmable and between peers, right? Model view controller, which is centralized, but also highly profitable because once it's centralized, you can make massive returns. And now CVC, which actually combines both of these in the best way. So it's peer-to-peer and programmable and open source like the original internet. But it also has new primitives for global state, and it's highly monetizable.
So why has no one figured this out yet for any of the top consumer companies? Is it because they're so smart and powerful and they're finding a way to stop it, or is it just really hard? Like, why isn't there a good competitor that more people are using to Facebook or Twitter or TikTok or
Well,
or
so
these others?
it's funny. So for Twitter, it now exists. I think BitClout is that thing. BitClout is first of all, it's very technically difficult. I think that's the fundamental reason.
Are we seeing exponential growth there yet? That's actually consistent. So this is. Should I only be using BitClout because it's less evil than Twitter? Is this like a thing that we should be shifting to? I think you and I are both on Twitter still a little bit.
Yeah, well, so just to talk about that for a second, right? One of my theses is that the decentralized version of something, when it works, is worth 10x the centralized version. That is to say, I think Bitcoin will, in the fullness of time, it's certainly 10x. It will be 10x PayPal. It may be 10x gold. Ethereum will be, like it's more valuable than Stripe, for example. Stripe's an amazing company. The Collisons are some of the
Stripe
best.
released some pretty awesome stuff recently. I think they could get to $1 trillion. I don't know, but of course, ETH you think could be more dramatic, more than that, I'd assume.
Exactly, that's right. The thing is, look, and Stripe may decentralize, by the way. Who knows? They're very smart, right? And I respect them both. But
Will Twitter or Facebook or TikTok decentralize because they have to compete? Is that where this goes then?
Well, so basically, just to close the point on Stripe, like I think of Stripe as a fiat Ethereum, which is a complement to both, right?
Yep.
Like basically it's a programming platform that you can do all kinds of things with, right? And billions of dollars is created out of that. Okay. I do think the crypto version of something, when it works, is 10x the offline version. For example, like Uniswap, which is a competitor to Coinbase and Binance and so on, a decentralized exchange, do you know how much money they have in their DAO?
No. What do they have?
What would you guess? How much money did they raise online to basically build a Uniswap DAO? How much is in the treasury?
$50 million. What is it?
4.3 billion last I looked.
Wow.
Yeah, wow, right?
It wasn't just all your money. There's other people doing this too.
Well, that's the thing. There's a website called open-orgs.info, right? Which shows all the treasuries of these DAOs, right? So decentralized exchanges, decentralized lending, decentralized X, Y, W, and Z. These show what can happen if you truly open up global capital markets to everyone, right? I mean, the thing is that crypto is to American capitalism what American capitalism was to Soviet communism.
But back to the point on BitClout and Facebook and Twitter and these guys. So how do they actually get them to decentralize, or how do these things actually win?
Right. So first on BitClout itself. So basically, just as disclosure, I'm an investor in BitClout. I'm an investor in basically everything in crypto and decentralized media and so on and so forth. Right. It's not a material percentage of my holdings. Okay. With that said, disclaimer out of the way. I am very impressed. I mean, basically, you and I share a concern over censorship, deplatforming, like kind of the political use of fact checking, all of this type of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's stuff. Facebook said they were going to be for free speech, and all of a sudden they started banning all sorts of stuff in ways that were completely inappropriate. Yeah, and Twitter's even worse. It's terrible. Yeah. Yeah,
exactly. And the thing is that it's easier sometimes to see this outside the American context. In China, where Tiananmen is filtered, but Li Wenliang's posts about COVID were filtered, and it's very in your face there. And what has happened in many ways is that sort of like the wokes in America have sort of on a convergent evolution path with China, right? Where
The wokes in America and the statists in China, they're both censoring things they don't like in similar ways.
yeah, and it's actually it goes on many different levels. Like for example, Xi Jinping thought is like Chinese wokeness. Like the app that they all have to kind of repeat. And the Chinese Great Firewall, well, the American analog is decentralized social media censorship. And the Chinese this concept of like human flesh search, right, which is like cancel culture, and so on and so forth. You can make a whole set of parallels here, right? And so the implementation is different, but there's like a pressure for convergent evolution here because only those ideologies, if you think about it from a very macro perspective, with Facebook connecting the world, everybody being like nodes in this gigantic global social network, it's something where as mind viruses spread on that social network, like operating systems for people's brains, viral kind of viruses are those that A, spread, and that B, lock it off so that no other thing can spread into their place.
They can't allow you to think other thoughts. If you think thoughts that could lead you to changing your operating system, those have to be marked as the most evil.
Exactly, that's right. So thus wokeness spreads on the basis of tolerance, and then Iron Fist is incredibly intolerant and filters, censors, thought controls, etc. Chinese nationalism, basically one way to think about it, wokeness is evolved for the English internet, and Chinese nationalism is evolved for the Chinese internet, right? Where there's certain background features that are assumed, like that the Chinese government has great firewall control and so on and so forth. So wokeness is finding it hard to get into China because they filter it like Hong Kong and so on and so forth.
Well, they already have their own operating system that's against this other thing. Yeah.
Exactly. So they play a strong defense, and wokes play a strong offense, right? But essentially, this is like, you don't want to be on either side of that one, right? And
you and I could be said to share a lot of values around believing in liberty and decentralization. Is that also an operating system, or is but it's a more tolerant operating system, I guess, that considers these ideas, or is it secretly we're also intolerant in our own ways?
Well, so my framework on this is that the near-term future, I gave a talk on this and I've got an edit to it, that it is, the future is communist capital versus woke capital versus crypto capital. And communist capital is straightforward. You must submit, right? Woke capital, you must sympathize, and crypto capital, you must be sovereign. Okay.
So smart people in our generation are probably going to end up falling into the woke capital or the crypto capital. There's not really something. Is there like a third category, which is just people who are just like, this is all stupid and I'm just too busy and I'm not going to think about it? Or do you basically get pulled into one of these camps?
You'll get pulled into one of these camps. And the reason is, like, there's basically one Chinese camp and two rest of world camps, right? There
must be other people in China who have their own camp, though, that like are secretly like horrified by the Chinese government.
Yes. So here's the second order, right? The second order is, you can actually think of these as points on a triangle. And so you have I put them as CCP, NYT, and BTC. Okay.
So New York Times, Bitcoin, and China's Communist Party. Okay.
Correct. That's right. Those are like the three extremal points on the triangle, right? And actually all three have their extremists. So I'll come to that point. So CCP, obviously, that's basically, you must submit. It's the most straightforward. The Chinese Communist Party is powerful.
They'll you up if you don't do what they want, and they're very clear about it. You'll disappear. Yeah.
That's right. And the thing is that the social contract there has been getting worse for entrepreneurship. We see Jack Ma because that's such a huge deal that it makes news overseas, right? We see the CEO of ByteDance. An ironic thing, by the way, on ByteDance is while he was getting attacked in the US for TikTok potentially being a surveillance app, he was also getting attacked in China for being insufficiently loyal to CCP and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah. No, these people. I mean, these people are attacked on both sides almost no matter what in these positions these days. It's the nature of it.
So basically, at one corner, CCP must submit, which is they're powerful, you're not, submit. You know what? There's a logic to that. I can understand why people do that, because they've got all the power. And so,
yeah, it's pretty nice to be rich and to be friends with everyone who's super powerful in your country who's not going to come f up your family. It's interesting what you're describing, Balaji, because it's almost like, I guess the rule of this triangle is that if you're on one of the extreme corners, you're going to attack people who are not in one of your corners. And so both sides always are going to be attacking the things in between as a way to scare them towards them, basically. Right?
That's right. And actually the BTC corner has its own crazy people, which I'll come back to. But okay, so CCP, you must submit, right? Then you go to the wokes and they say you must sympathize. Now there's a real trick that they do here, right? You must sympathize. Well, the CCP says that they are powerful. What the woke say is that you are powerful. because you are white or male or straight or cis or, like upper middle class or whatever, right? You are an oppressor. You're in an oppressor category. Here's the trick, right? Intersectionality turns us all into oppressors, because if you do the or statement, right? Like 50% of the world is male and maybe 90% is straight and, like 60% of
Well, I mean, I'm especially an oppressor, though. I think I check all the boxes, right? So, I mean, I feel like I won this game, except maybe I'm Jewish through my mom's side. But just Indians kind of in the oppressor class too these days in America, right? In tech world.
Here's the thing: is basically like, your card will get yanked when it is deemed, is Peter Thiel gay? Is is Anne Wojcicki, is she considered a woman? Is
Is Adrian Fenty or Thomas Sowell considered black if they go against, if he goes against the unions, or Sowell goes against these other, exactly.
Exactly. So the thing is that what happens is, you're attacked on your blind side. If you've got these various facets, right? Okay, you might be a person of color, well, you'll be attacked as a man. Oh, you're a woman, well, you'll be attacked as white. So everybody's an oppressor on some axis. That's the trick.
So you're vulnerable. So if you don't obey what we want, or we don't go along with what we're saying, then you're going to get attacked, basically. And so everyone's vulnerable to be attacked, and everyone has to be afraid.
Well, I literally mean it from an algebra standpoint, right? If you work it out, everybody is either, white or straight or cis or some oppressor category. So what wokeness does is it turns everybody into thinking they're a victim and but also being represented to others as an oppressor. So it's this war of all versus all. It puts everybody into conflict because everybody thinks there's a victim and everybody thinks of you as an oppressor on some dimension. You see what I'm saying? Right? And so the thing is,
except for me, I'm only on the oppressor side, I think.
Okay, sure. Well, but you see what I'm saying, right? Like basically, this is something where the trick with CCP is very straightforward. It's just straight down the middle. You must submit because they're powerful.
Yep.
With wokeness is you must apologize because you're powerful. You're powerful because you're white or you're male or you're straight. And then what happens after you apologize because you're powerful? Well, then, okay, you need to give your money. You need to give your status. You need to give your this. You need to give your that. Basically, both CCP just says bow your head, right? Wokeness says sympathize because you're powerful, and then bow your head in shame. But the end state of it is very similar, which is bow your head. Wokeness is more tricky, right? Because it's not straight down the middle. It pretends to empower. In this fashion, it's actually very similar. It's capitalism compatible, radical left, actually, in the sense that, with communism, communism was the redistribution of wealth, and wokeness is the redistribution of status. Communism had, the union strike, and wokeness has the social media mob. Think about the microeconomics of this, or the micro status economics.
Yeah.
A woke mob gathers, and they can beat somebody into submission, and they see the hearts go up on their side, and the RTs go up on their side, and the followers go up on their side.
Yeah.
And playing a game for real stakes where they can humiliate their enemies and boost their friends. What's not to like? All you have to do is mash a button and yell at somebody. That's really easy relative to building.
Yeah, no, I think I said something about how BLM was backed by Marxists at one point, and I got all these people on Twitter like threatening to put gas leaks in my house and attacking me and just saying nasty things, basically. Yeah.
We'll come back to this point because I think we need to start using more pseudonyms and stuff. It's tricky for us because we're in this transitional age. But
I have lots of guns in my house. I'm not too worried about them actually coming here, but that's a whole other conversation.
Okay. But
this is Texas, Balaji. Come on.
It's Texas. Okay, yeah, you're probably okay there. But so the thing is with these woke mobs, they, like the union strikes, are seeing a visible benefit of yelling at people online and ganging up on them and so on and so forth, right? They're gaining status from it. Now, what they're losing, though they don't fully understand it, is that by buying into the woke social contract, they may be able to yell at somebody as, mansplaining today, but they will get hit as being white privilege tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right?
So they're basically attacking themselves later, basically. Yeah.
Or somebody else can now hit them. They have now essentially cut down all assumptions of good faith in society. They're leeching the trust out of society, right?
Yep.
Because everybody is accused of the worst possible motivation for anything they could have done. And people are looking for a way to call out the other person to gain status at their expense, even if this is not fully conscious. It's basically like the hearts go up.
So a lot of this woke part of the triangle, the things they're doing are negative sum. They're actually going to hurt themselves. It's kind of, so, but it doesn't that mean it's self-destructive and it's just going to go away after a while though, or can it just do this for a long time before it goes away? Because it seems like you're describing a self-destructive system.
Well, I think it's going to be self-destructive because of inflation, but not necessarily because of its internal. So we'll come to that. Okay. So now we get to the third thing of the triangle, right? So CCP, you must submit. Wokeness, you must sympathize. And CCP, you must submit. NYT, wokeness, you must sympathize. And by the way, the reason I put NYT there as opposed to CCP is NYT is upstream of the state. That's to say a corporate journalist can get a politician fired, but not vice versa.
Yep.
It's not totally deterministic. They can write a negative article and they may survive that. But in general, right, it's one way versus the above, right? So NYT, like they're saying, like if China has a state-controlled press, America has a press-controlled state, in the sense of hold them accountable, get them fired. Okay, fine.
Of course.
So the third quadrant of the triangle, BTC, is you must be sovereign, right? And what does this mean? This means that rather than bending to CCP or rather than like sympathizing like the wokes want you to do, you have to hold your private keys locally, and the extreme version of this is the so-called Bitcoin max.
Just so people understand, holding your private keys locally means you don't even trust Coinbase or anyone with your money because someone else could take it away. So you actually literally have distributed money that's just yours that only you have access to. That would be the extreme version of crypto. Yeah.
That's right. So everything is as local as possible, so it overlaps obviously with prepping, which was a subculture prior to Corona, but now is the culture, remember how weird it was 2 years ago to have, N95 masks rather, and so on. Like that was weird, right? I took a lot of flack.
We sent a bunch of ours to the local hospital because we felt guilty when it happened. But my wife's a prepper as well, but that was unusual. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the thing is, like, the next crisis is very obvious. It's going to be inflation, I think, or at least inflation in a lot of physical goods. I think digital goods will be fine because their marginal costs are so low. So what will happen is the physical world, basically the nature of what COVID did is it turned the physical world into a premium product. That say, we've made it really cheap to put a lot of transistors on a chip, but it's expensive to put a lot of people in a room. We've moved from, it's not the digital divide anymore, it's a physical divide. So physical is still valuable, but it's a premium product. Everything gets done digital first. It's a remote meeting. It is, VR entertainment.
How is this tied to the sovereign corner? What are you?
How's it tied to sovereign corner? Okay. So the thing is that basically, just like there's extreme CCP people and extreme wokes, there are extreme maximalists who think, like Bitcoin is the only coin, and having anything other than that, you're an evil person, and you're a scammer, and you're a fraud, and you're a shill, and you're a charlatan, and so on and so forth, right? And in its own way, it's similar to wokeness, which makes these accusations of being racist, sexist, et cetera, et cetera.
But they're not powerful enough to actually do anything to people. So like the woke people and the CCP people, right?
Yeah, but they're on an exponential.
This is interesting because obviously you're more on the side of these sovereign crypto corner people, the BTC corner. But I assume you're not like attacking people for using Dogecoin or something and like trying to make them in trouble.
I think Dogecoin is stupid, but do I think, for example, something like Zcash, I think that's really good because that Zcash is
because it's more private. No one can track it no matter what, right? Which is
that's right. That's right. So the thing is, as a venture capitalist, let me talk about the maximalist position a little bit here because I think it is. I want to steelman it before I criticize it, right?
Yep.
Because there's one way of thinking about it is what a liberal is to a woke, like a libertarian is to a maximalist. Like that's to say it's like an extreme version that then inverts some of the principles and so on, right?
Yeah.
So essentially, there's different reasons that people become Bitcoin maximalists. People are going to hear a lot more about this, by the way, I think over the years to come. But one of them is just total distrust in institutions, okay, which is understandable. I'm going to list a bunch of stuff that I agree with, right? A second is, fear of upcoming inflation, which I agree with, or deplatforming by banks, and just general disgust with the debt culture of, not just the US, but the world, like, 30-year mortgage and,
Yeah, this is like this extreme position of people who are really smart and really cynical, you could almost say, about how the world works right now.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's something where all of this I'll agree with up to the point that they lose me is, and therefore no coin other than Bitcoin, right?
But I mean, isn't it a little more cynical than that, Balaji? Because obviously, like you and I both know, like we need things like we need things like Palantir and Stripe, and we need competent institutions sometimes to accomplish certain things, right? Don't we? To actually build things that are competent, we need institutions sometimes.
So this is right. So this is basically the failure mode of like extreme, like ultra libertarianism, right? Ultra libertarianism is something that is like the caricature, right? Of libertarianism, where I didn't actually think it existed, but it's people who truly don't trust anybody, right? Who attack the motives of every single person and so on.
But you and I are both builders, and we know that in order to get things done in the world, you need entities that attract smart people and build together.
What we want is something where it's neither you must submit, nor you must sympathize, nor you must be sovereign, but something in the middle, which I call the decentralized center. It's like the center of this triangle.
The more sane people who aren't all the way at the extreme. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, it is basically the relative moderates of each, because you actually don't want a society where nobody ever submits, where nobody ever sympathizes.
This is really interesting. So you're saying there's actually some wisdom on each of these corners, and we actually want to learn the wisdom from each of these corners. So you do want to be somewhat woke in the sense that you should be stopping yourself if you have biases that are unconscious biases, or you do want to be somewhat decentralized and skeptical of institutions that are big and broken and scary, but you don't want to be crazy on either side.
Exactly. And the thing is, this is the practical set of trade-offs. Look, there's many possible optima within that space that different people will choose, right? But in practice, you don't want a society where nobody ever submits is like San Francisco, where people can run into a Walgreens and steal everything, right? The society where nobody ever sympathizes is like the total opposite of woke society. It's like, I don't know, Russia in the 90s, right? Everybody assumes everybody else is a scammer and cynical and whatever. And that's actually similar to the place where everybody's sovereign. Then there's zero possibility of trust, zero possibility of cooperation.
So those are three corners. Got it.
That's right. And so I think that ultimately, that's right. Basically, if, again, to caricature, there's the Democrat wants more government, the Republican wants less government, the Libertarian wants no government, and the technological progressive technologist wants a new government. That's to say, a new state, right? So now let's talk about that, the network state.
Yep.
So what I think we're on course for, we're actually already at, it's kind of funny, I write these essays and I think that they're going to be predicting 6 months or, so it's like 5 years or 10 years out, and then it happens in like less than 6 months. Okay. It's kind of amazing actually. But one of the things I've been thinking a lot about is if you think about this global graph of everybody connected together, like where you and I, for example, we have a link between ourselves, despite the fact that we're whatever thousands of miles away, right?
It's a special link.
Who are physically closer to you and physically closer to me that we don't know and we wouldn't recognize on the street, right?
Yep.
So what is happening, but it has been happening over the last 15 or 20 years. I don't know if you remember this, but 8 years ago, we were at a thing and I was like, Snapchat is on a straight line with the dissolution of the nation state. Do you remember that?
Yeah, no, I remember the discussion of this. Is kind of like correlated with some interesting things in our society, arguably.
Yes. And basically, it's a one-liner. It's meant to be provocative and poke, and people are like, "What are you mean, you crazy guy?" And the point is that Snapchat has somebody in New York or in California, 3,000 miles away, sharing intimate moments, but they don't know their next door neighbor, right? Yep. So the fundamental assumptions behind geographic polities, where people who are near each other share cultural norms and therefore agree on laws, and therefore can resolve disputes because they're in the same community and they have some degree of consensus. Those assumptions are being invalidated. Communities are not geographical; they are communities of mind. If you notice, for example, like on Twitter, all the bios, they used to read something like, hey, I'm Jim, I'm 32, I'm in Pittsburgh, I like the Steelers, whatever, right?
Yeah, it used to be more about your location and where you are, but now it's more about your thoughts and how you identify with communities that have similar things they're interested in and think about things similarly. That's interesting.
Exactly. So now it's all tribal banners, pound Bitcoin, pound BLM, like pronouns, laser eyes. All
so even the pronouns, which is from this old woke corner, is actually part of it's this new network state thing, because they're actually just signifying themselves based on that perspective and viewpoint, which is how the whole world is moving towards.
That's right. So essentially, one way of thinking about it is we just or last 20 something years, we just uploaded the entire world in plain text onto the internet, right? And at first it was okay because we sort of had, like the offline trust and relationships and so on, like let's say you take a school when Facebook got schools online, and those people pretty much knew each other.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, it used to only reflect the real world, but then it became the real world. And when it became the real world, then this changed everything.
Well, one of the biggest things is when you connect everybody to everybody, some people can't stand each other, right? Some Ohio mechanic making a remark to his coworker, a guy in New York City who was working at a newspaper might not know or care.
Yeah, no, a 75-year-old white guy talking about race to his buddy is probably not going to come across well to the 30-somethings from Stanford.
Exactly, right? So the thing is that everybody's now just cheek by jowl online, right? The borders haven't been created. That's why Twitter is the public war zone, and that's basically, we're in the middle of, cancel culture is one term for it, but a better term is, I call this the social war, right? If you go and look at a map in 1861, the blue and the gray at that time, that civil war was something where the ideological groups were geographically and physically separated. So the victory condition was obvious. It was that A invades B's territory and so on. Okay. But if you look at a more recent map of the US, with Democrat and Republican counties, it's not like, this half is Republican, this half is Democrat. It's very fractal. There's purple counties, there's blue cities and all this type of stuff, right?
On my street in Texas, there's one neighbor that got really angry when I put a big Texas flag up. So, but it's still a little mixed. Yeah.
That's right. So the thing is that any plan to quote settle it with violence wouldn't even make sense, because what are you going to do? Invade, San Francisco and Boise? Like it doesn't make sense. It's too fractal. Even bombing or whatever, you'd hit a bunch of guys on blue team or red team, right?
Invading San Francisco is not the worst idea you've mentioned in this conversation. But yes, I agree. That's not how it's going to work.
Yeah. But here's the thing. Because in physical space, people are sort of cheek by jowl, where the battle was actually waged, was in social media space. And there's a graph in CGR from 2017. Maybe I can send it to your guys afterwards. You can put it on the screen doing this. But in social media space, these two groups are disjoint, right? Yep. The blue and the red. And here's the thing: if in physical space you win by physical war, you win by invading your opponent's territory. In social space, in digital space, you win by invading their mind.
Yep.
And so once you think of cancel culture as not being cancel culture, but it's a state of social war.
Well, this explains polarization in a lot of other things, because if they're in this kind of social war, they're both going to pull at the extremes in order to try to win this battle, because that's the battle they're fighting.
Right. It's two mind viruses, two memeplexes, not just a single meme, but a combination of them slugging it out. And now we can actually understand deplatforming, boycotts, cancellation, et cetera, in another way. What they want are lights on blue team or red team to wink out and silence, right? It's sort of like an enemy battleship.
Yeah, they're trying to silence them, cancel them, quiet them down. I want to get to. I know earlier you said you're bearish on America, but bullish on technology and Asia and progress. But you've told me you're more recently more bullish on America. So I want to fast forward this to how what's going to happen with network states, and why are you more bullish on America now?
Okay, so I'm bullish. I'm bullish on part of America. Let me call it crypto America. Okay, and what I'm bullish on is Suarez in Miami. I'm bullish on what you're doing in Austin. I'm bullish on Caitlin Long in Wyoming. I'm bullish on the states that have passed crypto and Bitcoin bills. Like actually, Nebraska has done some good stuff. Colorado has done some good stuff.
So in some ways, we're separating out the country a little bit, and there's parts that are remaining functional, and they're going to be even more functional.
Well, the thing is, COVID is just, Thiel's line from almost a decade ago that still actually resonates. It's amazing that there's going to be one person that made the world safe for capitalism, and B, that the race between politics and technology might be very close and down to the wire, right? So COVID has been this enormous accelerant of obviously this total state, right? With, not lockdowns for health, short-term lockdowns, like East Asia actually managed to do them in a relatively sane way, but stupid lockdowns like what happened in the West, where there's just no plan.
So COVID's accelerated the race between politics and technology.
Exactly, but on the other hand, it made it possible to do remote work. It made it possible to migrate and move. It accelerated.
It was a usually bad year for like dumb government doing things in some ways, but it was a usually positive year for technology having a much bigger impact on our lives.
Yes, and not just technology, but crypto, right?
Yep.
Because so the centralized state and the decentralized network, that is the real political axis of the world. That is just like capitalism versus communism was the big fight of the 20th century. The network versus the state, the decentralized network versus the centralized state, that's a big fight.
How do we help push this fight forward in the right way, and what's it going to look like when it ends positively?
So, well, I think it's really important. There's basically both the inside game and the outside game. I think that I'm very bearish on anything at the U.S. federal government or EU level. I'm very bullish on state and local governments within the U.S. Right. So as we mentioned, just Miami and Austin and so on and so forth. And I'm also bullish on international, right? So, Dubai and Switzerland and Singapore and, actually El Salvador and Latin America. And
El Salvador recently became the first country to adopt Bitcoin as legal tender. Obviously, that's very exciting. Yeah.
Huge deal, huge deal. This is a massive thing in the Bitcoin community in particular, right?
Are you going to go spend time there and make sure it works? Are you going to stop by?
Undisclosed plans right now, but basically, it's very, very, very important.
Let me know. It's a short flight from Texas. We can go help them out.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Sure. Actually, I believe maybe we can do that. So the network state concept, right? Basically, what is happening now is that political divisions within cities, I think, will start to decline, but economic competition between cities will rise, right? So Democrat versus Republican within cities will fall.
You have to tell Keith to stop trying to compete with me between Miami and Austin. He's really into competing with everyone.
Well, here's the thing. It's actually progress to go from the two-party system to the N-city system.
That's fair. That's fair.
Right? That's huge. From Democrat versus Republican to SF versus Miami versus Austin. Like, that's healthy competition. That's actually more like sports teams, because most of the people you're working with on a daily basis are not attacking you for money or attacking you. They're actually, it's so much healthier to cheer against the Phillies or whatever over there than to like beat up over here, right? I'm not saying economic competition can't get crazy. It can, okay?
And this could be cities and states within the U.S. It could be other city states around the world, and we gotta and those are gonna compete, and there's a bunch of them are gonna be competent, and they're gonna attract these network states. Basically, these groups that are functional to these places, and then prove kind of these ideas.
That's right. I think we're going to see them forming like Hanseatic League type things, like the Hanseatic League of I forget, it was the 1400s or 1300s, with a bunch of cities that unite together against pirates. These startup cities will find each other online and start.
So they'll compete, but they're also going to ally. But at a high level, there's this like very optimistic vision that there is a way that competent people on these network states get together and fight for the values of the competent part of the triangle and kind of stop the bad forces from winning.
That's right. And the good thing is that because we have physical mobility, because we have remote work, because we have the remote economy, there are finally competitive forces that are acting to reform these. Like
crypto and technology are like the positive forces that are going to allow us to solve these problems. Balaji, I think that's an awesome place to leave it. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me this evening.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.